Homeless man saves woman from car accident. He never expected that she was the richest woman in his city. Hello and welcome to 80s Love Stories, where I, your favorite narrator, Christopher, bring you an exciting love story straight from the unforgettable 1980s. Get ready for a journey full of nostalgia and incredible twists. Today's story is truly remarkable, with an ending that's sure to touch your heart and leave you amazed. So, stay with me until the very last moment. I hope this experience is unforgettable for you, and may God bless you and your family. Now, let's get started. On a bitter winter morning in 1983, Marcus huddled beneath the thin newspaper that served as his only blanket, watching the cars zoom past on Montgomery Street in downtown Boston. His weathered hands, calloused from years of hard labor before his downfall, clutched a worn cardboard sign. The morning traffic rushed by, commuters in their warm vehicles barely sparing him a glance. At 45, Marcus had lived on these streets for 3 years, ever since the factory closure that took his job and eventually his home. Yet despite his circumstances, he maintained a quiet dignity, his steel-grey eyes still sharp and observant beneath his unkempt beard. The January wind cut through his layers of tattered clothing, but he barely noticed anymore. He'd grown accustomed to the cold, just as he'd grown accustomed to being invisible to the well-dressed professionals hurrying past. His spot near the intersection gave him a clear view of both the street and the elegant brownstone buildings that lined it, a constant reminder of the life he once had. That morning seemed like any other, until he heard the distinctive screech of failing brakes. Marcus looked up to see a sleek Jaguar XJ6 sliding on the icy road, its wheels locked as it careened toward the intersection. Behind the wheel, a woman fought to control the vehicle, her face a mask of terror, visible through the windshield. Without hesitation, Marcus sprang to his feet, his body moving before his mind could process the danger. The Jaguar was heading straight for a concrete barrier, and at its current speed, the impact would be devastating. He sprinted toward the car, his feet somehow finding purchase on the slick pavement. The woman inside, whom he would later know as Sarah Wellington, had managed to turn the wheel enough to avoid a head-on collision, but the car was still spinning out of control. As it approached the barrier, Marcus reached the driver's side door. In one fluid motion, he yanked it open, grabbed Sarah's arm, and pulled her from the vehicle mere seconds before it crashed into the barrier with a sickening crunch of metal and glass. They tumbled onto the sidewalk together, Marcus taking the brunt of the fall. For a moment, they lay there in the snow, his arm still protectively around her, both of them breathing heavily as the reality of what had just happened sank in. Sarah was the first to move, pushing herself up to look at her savior. Her designer suit was ruined, her carefully styled blonde hair in disarray, but she was alive. She stared at Marcus with wide blue eyes, taking in his ragged appearance even as she struggled to find words. You saved my life," she finally managed, her voice trembling. Her hand, adorned with an expensive-looking ring, reached out to touch his shoulder, as if to confirm he was real. Marcus quickly withdrew, suddenly very aware of his shabby state next to her obvious wealth. "Anyone would have done the same, ma'am," he mumbled, already beginning to retreat. The crowd was gathering now, and he could hear sirens in the distance. "Wait!" Sarah called after him, but Marcus was already disappearing into the growing crowd of onlookers. He didn't belong in their world of expensive cars and tailored suits. He returned to his corner, picking up his discarded sign and newspaper, trying to ignore the commotion around the accident scene. But as he settled back into his spot, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The way she had looked at him, not through him like most people did, but at him, seeing him as a person, stirred something he'd thought long buried: hope. What Marcus didn't know, as he huddled back under his newspaper, was that Sarah Wellington wasn't just any wealthy woman. She was the owner of Wellington Industries, one of Boston's largest real estate development companies. And she wasn't about to let her mysterious savior disappear back into the shadows of the city. As paramedics checked her for injuries and police took statements from witnesses, her eyes kept drifting back to the corner where Marcus sat, his figure barely visible through the swirling snow. In that moment, as she watched him fade into the background of the city life, Sarah made a decision that would change both their lives forever. But for now, Marcus remained in his corner, unaware that his simple act of courage had set in motion events that would transform his world in ways he could never imagine. He pulled his thin layers tighter around himself and watched as they towed away the mangled Jaguar, trying to convince himself that the warmth he'd felt when she looked at him was nothing more than the adrenaline of the moment. The next few days passed slowly for Marcus, each hour marked by the steady stream of traffic and the occasional clink of coins in his paper cup. The accident began to feel like a dream, something his mind had conjured up to escape the monotony of street life. But every time he closed his eyes, he could still see her face, those blue eyes looking at him with such gratitude and wonder. The weather had turned even colder, and the February wind whipped through the streets with renewed vigor. Marcus had moved his spot closer to the shelter of a nearby building where the wind wasn't quite as brutal. He sat there, watching Miami Vice episodes through the window of an electronics store across the street, their wall of TVs displaying Don Johnson's latest adventure in his white suit. It was during one of these moments, lost in the glow of the TV screens, that a black Lincoln Town car pulled up to the curb. Marcus barely noticed it at first. Expensive cars were common in this part of town, but when the back door opened and a familiar figure stepped out, his heart skipped a beat. Sarah Wellington looked different from the day of the accident. Her hair was perfectly styled, her navy business suit immaculate. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention, but there was something else in her bearing, a gentleness that hadn't been there before. "I've been looking for you," she said, approaching him directly. Several passers-by stopped to stare, surprised to see someone of her obvious status speaking to a homeless man. "You disappeared before I could properly thank you." Marcus struggled to his feet, suddenly very conscious of his unwashed clothes and matted beard. "No thanks necessary, ma'am," he mumbled, fighting the urge to retreat into the shadows. Sarah's eyes took in his condition, noting the way he shivered despite his layers of clothing. "My name is Sarah Wellington," she said, extending her hand as if they were meeting in a boardroom rather than on a street corner. "And you are?" He hesitated before taking her hand, trying to touch it as briefly as possible. Marcus Thompson." "Well, Mr. Thompson, you saved my life last week. I'd like to repay that debt." Before Marcus could protest, she continued, "I own a chain of hotels. We're looking for maintenance staff at our downtown location. The position comes with accommodation, a small apartment above the maintenance area. Would you be interested?" Marcus stared at her, waiting for the punchline. When none came, he found his voice. "Ma'am, Miss Wellington, I appreciate the offer, but I haven't worked in years. My papers aren't exactly in order, and "We can help with the documentation," she interrupted smoothly. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Mr. Thompson. Sometimes they just need someone to offer it." As they talked, a young woman emerged from the town car. Her presence caught Marcus's attention immediately. There was something familiar about her features. "This is Alice, my daughter," Sarah introduced. "She insisted on coming with me today." Alice stepped forward, her eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you for saving my mother," she said simply. "I don't know what I would have done if—" She stopped, her voice catching. Marcus felt something crack inside him, a wall he'd built over years of hardship. These women weren't looking at him with pity or disgust. They saw him as a person, someone worthy of respect and gratitude. "The job offer is genuine," Sarah continued, "but I understand if you need time to think about it. We'll be at the Hotel Wellington on Berkeley Street if you decide to accept." She placed a business card in his hand, the gold lettering catching the winter sunlight. After they left, Marcus stood holding the card for a long time, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. The offer seemed too good to be true, yet something in Sarah's eyes told him it was genuine. That night, in his usual spot in the shelter, Marcus pulled out the card again. Around him, the usual sounds of the shelter filled the air, snoring, quiet conversations, the occasional cough. But for the first time in years, he felt something different stirring in his chest. Purpose. The next morning, after a restless night, Marcus made his way to a public bathroom in the park. He spent an hour trying to make himself presentable, washing up as best he could with the cold water and hand soap. His clothes were still ragged, but they were the cleanest ones he owned. The Hotel Wellington stood proud on Berkeley Street, its Art Deco facade a testament to old Boston money. Marcus stood across the street for nearly an hour, watching people come and go through the brass revolving doors, businessmen with briefcases, tourists with cameras, wealthy women in fur coats. This was a different world from his street corner. Finally, gathering his courage, he crossed the street. The doorman gave him a suspicious look, but didn't stop him as he entered the lobby. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a grand staircase that curved elegantly up to the mezzanine level. At the front desk, he cleared his throat nervously. "I'm here to see Sarah Wellington. My name is Marcus Thompson." The clerk's eyebrows rose slightly, but she picked up the phone. Within minutes, Sarah appeared from a side office, her face lighting up with a genuine smile when she saw him. "Mr. Thompson, I'm so glad you came." She gestured for him to follow her to her office, ignoring the curious stares from guests and staff alike. The office was warm and welcoming, with large windows overlooking the city. Sarah motioned for him to sit in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. "Before you say anything," she began, "I want you to know that this isn't charity. We genuinely need someone with maintenance experience, and from what I've learned about you, you worked in manufacturing for 20 years before the factory closed." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "You looked into my background?" "Of course. I run a business, Mr. Thompson. But what I found only confirmed my instincts. You were a skilled machinist, a reliable employee, and someone who fell on hard times through no fault of your own. The fact that you risked your life to save a stranger tells me everything else I need to know about your character." She pulled out a folder and placed it on the desk between them. "This contains everything you need to start over. Paperwork for the job, keys to the apartment, even an advance on your first month's salary so you can buy some new clothes and necessities. The only question is, are you ready to take this chance?" Marcus stared at the folder, his hands trembling slightly. In it lay everything he'd dreamed of during those cold nights on the street. A job, a home, a purpose. But more than that, it represented something he'd almost forgotten existed: trust. Someone was willing to trust him again. "Why?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do all this for a stranger?" Sarah's expression softened. "Because 3 years ago I lost my husband in an accident. No one stopped to help him, but you didn't hesitate to risk your life for someone you didn't know. That kind of courage and humanity deserves to be rewarded." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "Besides, I believe in second chances. Sometimes life knocks us down, Mr. Thompson. The true measure of a person is not how many times they fall, but how many times they get back up." Marcus looked at the folder again, then at Sarah's reflection in the window. In that moment, he made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. He reached for the folder, and with it, reached for a second chance at life. Marcus's first week at the Hotel Wellington passed in a blur of activity. His apartment, though small, felt like a palace compared to the streets. It had a kitchenette, a bathroom with hot water, and a window that overlooked the city. At night, he would often sit by that window, watching the lights of Boston twinkle below, still hardly believing this wasn't all a dream. The maintenance work came naturally to him. Years of factory experience had given him an intuitive understanding of mechanical systems, and his hands remembered the feel of tools even after years on the street. The hotel's aging boiler system, temperamental elevators, and endless array of minor repairs kept him busy from morning until evening. The other staff members were cautious around him at first. He caught whispers in the break room, curious glances in the hallways. Everyone knew his story, the homeless man who had saved Mrs. Wellington's life. Some viewed him with suspicion, others with a sort of confused awe, but Marcus kept his head down and focused on his work, letting his actions speak for themselves. One morning, while fixing a leaky pipe in the basement, Marcus heard footsteps approaching. He looked up to see Alice Wellington, Sarah's daughter, making her way carefully through the maze of pipes and equipment. "Mr. Thompson," she called out, holding a paper bag. "Mom asked me to bring you some lunch. She noticed you haven't been using the employee cafeteria." Marcus wiped his hands on his new work uniform, embarrassed. Truth was, he still felt uncomfortable eating in front of others. 3 years of scrounging for meals had left their mark. That's very kind, but you didn't have to— Please, Alice interrupted, setting the bag down on a nearby workbench. It's the least we can do. Besides, I wanted to talk to you. Marcus noticed she was dressed in the latest fashion, a Madonna-inspired outfit complete with lace gloves and bangles, her hair styled in the way that was popular among young women in '83. But there was something in her eyes that seemed older than her years. "Did you know my father?" she asked abruptly. Marcus shook his head. "No. I'm sorry. I didn't. He died 3 years ago. Car accident on a rainy night. Nobody stopped to help." She fiddled with her bangles, a nervous gesture. "That's why what you did means so much to Mom. You didn't just save her life, you restored her faith in people." The weight of her words hung in the damp basement air. Marcus thought about responding, but Alice continued. "She's different now, you know. Since the accident, I've seen her smile more in the past week than she has in years." She looked at him directly. "Whatever you're doing, please don't stop." Before Marcus could process this, Alice was already heading back upstairs, her footsteps echoing against the concrete floor. The conversation stayed with Marcus throughout the day. As he worked, he thought about Sarah Wellington, not as the wealthy hotel owner who had given him a second chance, but as a woman who had faced her own struggles, her own losses. That evening, as he was finishing up his shift, he ran into Sarah in the service corridor. She was wearing a power suit typical of the era, her hair styled perfectly, but she looked tired. "Marcus," she said, using his first name for the first time, "how are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you, Mrs. Wellington. The work keeps me busy." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Please, call me Sarah. Listen, I wanted to ask if you'd join me for dinner in my office tomorrow. There are some maintenance projects I'd like to discuss." Marcus hesitated. He was still conscious of the vast difference in their social positions, despite her kindness. "I wouldn't want to impose—" "You wouldn't be," she assured him. "Besides, it gets lonely eating dinner alone in that office every night." The vulnerability in her admission caught him off guard. Before he could overthink it, he found himself nodding. "I'd be honored. Sarah." The next evening, Marcus showed up at Sarah's office wearing the nicest clothes he'd bought with his advance, a simple button-down shirt and slacks. He'd trimmed his beard and combed his hair, trying to look presentable. Sarah had ordered from a local Italian restaurant. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the office, and she had cleared her desk to make room for the containers of pasta and bread. "I hope you like Italian," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "It's my comfort food." As they ate, Sarah began talking about the hotel's history, its architecture, the challenges of maintaining a historic building, but gradually, the conversation shifted to more personal matters. "Alice told me she spoke with you," Sarah said, twirling pasta around her fork. "About her father." Marcus nodded, unsure how to respond. "Robert was— he was everything to us," Sarah continued, her voice soft. "When he died, I threw myself into work. It was easier than facing the emptiness at home. Alice was only 15. She needed her mother. But I wasn't really there for her. Not the way I should have been." She set down her fork, looking out at the city lights. "When you pulled me from that car, it wasn't just my life you saved. You woke me up, made me realize I'd been hiding from life instead of living it." Marcus found himself sharing, too, about the factory closure, the months of searching for work, the slow slide into homelessness, how he'd maintained his dignity by helping others on the street when he could, sharing what little he had. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the cold, he admitted. It was becoming invisible. People would look right through you, like you weren't even human anymore. Sarah reached across the desk, her hand stopping just short of touching his. "You're not invisible anymore, Marcus." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Finally, Sarah cleared her throat and began gathering the empty containers. "I actually do have some maintenance projects to discuss," she said, pulling out a folder. "We're planning to renovate the East Wing, and I'd value your input on the mechanical systems." They spent the next hour reviewing plans and discussing improvements. Marcus found himself thoroughly engaged, offering suggestions based on his years of experience. Sarah listened attentively, taking notes and asking questions. As he left her office that night, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: pride, not just in his work, but in himself. He was contributing, making a difference, being seen. Back in his apartment, he stood by his window, looking out at the city. The same city that had been so cruel to him now seemed full of possibility. But more than that, he found himself thinking about Sarah, her strength, her vulnerability, the way she looked when she really smiled. He pushed the thoughts away. She was his employer, his benefactor. Nothing more could come of it. Still, as he prepared for bed, he couldn't help but feel that something had shifted that evening, like the first notes of a song he didn't yet know how to sing. Spring arrived in Boston, bringing with it warm breezes and cherry blossoms. Marcus had now been working at the Hotel Wellington for 3 months, and his transformation was remarkable. His face, once gaunt and weathered, had filled out. His grey hair was neatly trimmed, and his new wardrobe, though modest, was clean and well-maintained. The hotel staff had gradually accepted him, especially after he fixed the temperamental elevator that had been a source of complaints for years. Even Gerald, the skeptical head doorman, who had initially watched him like a hawk, now greeted him with genuine respect. One April morning, while Marcus was repairing an air conditioning unit on the top floor, he overheard 2 guests talking around the corner. "Can you believe Sarah Wellington hired a homeless man?" one woman whispered. "I heard she's been having private dinners with him in her office." "Well, you know how she's been since Robert died," the other replied, "always making impulsive decisions. The board members are worried she's losing her grip on the business." Marcus's hand stilled on the wrench he was holding. He hadn't realized his presence was causing problems for Sarah. The weekly dinners in her office had become a highlight of his life. They talked about everything from books to music, sharing stories and laughs. She'd even brought in her old record player one evening, introducing him to her collection of jazz albums. Later that day, Sarah found him in the maintenance shop, surrounded by tools and repair manuals. She was wearing a teal blazer with shoulder pads, her blonde hair styled in the feathered look popular that year. "Marcus, I need your help with something," she said, then noticed his troubled expression. "Is everything all right?" He forced a smile. "Fine. Just concentrating on work." "What can I help you with?" "The renovation committee is meeting tomorrow to discuss the East Wing project. I'd like you to present your ideas about the mechanical systems upgrade." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "I don't think that would be appropriate. I'm just the maintenance man." "You're the most knowledgeable person in this building about its systems," Sarah countered. "The committee needs to hear your expertise." Before he could protest further, Alice appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with excitement. "Mom, guess what? I got accepted to Boston University's journalism program." Sarah's face lit up. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful." She hugged her daughter tightly. "Mr. Thompson, you have to come to dinner with us to celebrate," Alice insisted. "Mom's taking me to Anthony's in the North End." Marcus saw Sarah's eyes brighten at her daughter's suggestion, but he remembered the whispered conversation from earlier. "That's very kind, but I should really finish this work." "Please," Alice pressed. "You're part of why I got in, you know. That story I wrote about you for my application essay, about second chances and judgment, the admissions officer said it was what convinced them." Marcus felt his resolve weakening, especially when he saw the hope in Sarah's eyes. "Well, if you're sure." That evening, Marcus found himself sitting in one of Boston's finest Italian restaurants, feeling both honored and out of place. The maitre d' had raised an eyebrow at his modest attire, but Sarah's name had smoothed over any hesitation. As they celebrated Alice's acceptance, Marcus watched the interaction between mother and daughter. There was an ease between them that hadn't been there 3 months ago. Alice was animated, talking about her plans for college, while Sarah listened with genuine interest, fully present in the moment. "Marcus," Sarah said, turning to him, "would you mind getting us some more water? The waiter seems to have disappeared." As he stood up, he noticed a group of well-dressed men at a nearby table watching them. One of them, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair, was frowning disapprovingly. When he returned, he overheard the end of a conversation between Sarah and Alice. "Mom, you can't let the board pressure you like this," Alice was saying. "You own the majority shares." It's complicated, sweetheart, Sarah replied, then quickly changed the subject when she saw Marcus approaching. The rest of the evening was pleasant, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His suspicions were confirmed the next morning when he arrived at work to find an emergency board meeting in progress. Through the closed doors of the conference room, he could hear raised voices. One in particular carried clearly, the same silver-haired man from the restaurant. "Sarah, this is exactly what we're talking about. You're making this personal. First, you hire a homeless man without proper background checks. Then you start having private dinners with him. Now you're taking him to fine restaurants. What would Robert think?" "Don't you dare bring Robert into this, Richard." Sarah's voice was steel. "Marcus Thompson has proven himself more than capable and trustworthy. The staff respects him, the guests appreciate his work, and the hotel's maintenance costs have decreased by 30% since he started. That's not the point, and you know it. The board is concerned about your judgment. These emotional decisions could jeopardize everything your family has built." Marcus stepped away from the door, his mind racing. He'd been naive to think his presence wouldn't cause problems for Sarah. She'd risked so much to give him a second chance, and now her position was being threatened because of it. That afternoon, he typed up his resignation letter. It was the hardest thing he'd ever written, but he couldn't let Sarah risk her family's legacy for him. He slipped the envelope under her office door when he knew she was still in meetings. As he packed up his few belongings in the apartment, he heard a knock. Opening the door, he found Alice standing there, out of breath as if she'd run up the stairs. "Don't you dare," she said, waving his resignation letter. "Don't you dare do this to her." "Alice, I'm causing problems for your mother. The board has been trying to push Mom out since Dad died," Alice interrupted. "They think she's too soft, too emotional to run the business. They wanted to sell to a big hotel chain, but Mom refused. She believes in keeping it independent, keeping it personal. You're not the problem, Marcus. You're proof that she's right." Marcus sat heavily on his bed, trying to process this information. "I don't want to make things harder for her." "Then don't leave," Alice said simply, "because losing you, that would break her heart." The weight of Alice's words hung in the air between them. Marcus thought about Sarah, her kindness, her strength, the way she looked at him like he mattered. He thought about their dinners together, the laughter they shared, the music they discovered they both loved. "What should I do?" he asked quietly. Alice smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." Alice led Marcus through the hotel's back corridors, up a series of stairs he'd never taken before, finally emerging onto the hotel's rooftop. The evening air was warm for April, and the Boston skyline stretched out before them, bathed in the golden light of sunset. In one corner of the roof, partially hidden behind an old ventilation unit, stood a small greenhouse. Its glass panels were aged but intact, and through them Marcus could see an array of plants thriving in the enclosed space. "Mom built this after Dad died," Alice explained, pulling out a key. "Nobody knows about it except me and now you. This is where she comes when things get overwhelming." Inside, the greenhouse was humid and alive with greenery. Orchids bloomed alongside herbs and small flowering plants. A worn wicker chair sat in one corner, next to a small table holding a battery-powered radio and what looked like a journal. "Robert loved gardens," a voice said behind them. They turned to find Sarah standing in the doorway, still in her business suit from the board meeting. "He always said we should add a rooftop garden to the hotel, but there were always too many regulations, too many complications." She moved into the greenhouse, touching a leaf here, adjusting a pot there. "After he died, I needed a place that was just mine. Somewhere I could remember him without everyone watching, waiting for me to break down or make a mistake." Marcus noticed her hands were trembling slightly. "Sarah, I'm sorry about the board meeting. I never meant to cause—" "Stop," she said firmly. "You have nothing to apologize for, Richard and the board. They've been looking for excuses since Robert died. They think I'm too emotional, too invested in the people rather than the profits." She laughed bitterly. "As if that's a weakness." "They're wrong," Marcus said quietly. "Your compassion, your ability to see the worth in people, that's not weakness. It's the kind of strength this world needs more of." Sarah turned to him. her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Then why were you going to leave?" Marcus felt the weight of her gaze, of Alice's presence, of all the unspoken things between them. "I thought I was protecting you. I heard what they were saying about me, about us. I couldn't bear the thought of damaging your reputation, your position here." "That's not your decision to make," Sarah said, stepping closer. "I knew exactly what I was doing when I hired you. Yes, it was an emotional decision. My heart told me it was right, but my head agreed. You're skilled, hard-working, honest. The hotel runs better because of you. The staff respects you. You've proven yourself in every way possible. But the board needs to see the numbers," Alice interrupted, pulling a folder from her bag. "I've been helping Mom prepare for tomorrow's shareholders meeting. Since you started, maintenance costs are down, guest satisfaction scores are up, and employee turnover in the maintenance department is 0. Facts don't care about prejudice." Marcus took the folder, scanning the carefully prepared charts and graphs. The evidence was clear. His presence had made a measurable positive impact on the hotel's operations. "I'm presenting this tomorrow," Sarah said, "along with a proposal to promote you to Chief of Maintenance Operations. It's a management position, with a seat on the hotel's operational committee." Marcus looked up, stunned. "Sarah, Don't say you're not qualified," she cut him off. "You've been doing the job already. The only difference is now you'll have the title and authority to match your responsibilities." "And a proper office," Alice added with a grin. "No more eating dinner in Mum's office like it's some secret." Marcus felt overwhelmed. 3 months ago, he'd been sleeping on the streets. Now he was being offered a management position at one of Boston's premier hotels. But more than that, he was being offered validation, proof that Sarah's faith in him hadn't been misplaced. "There will be opposition," he said finally. "Let them oppose," Sarah replied. "I own controlling interest in this hotel. More importantly, I believe in you. The question is, do you believe in yourself enough to stay and fight?" Marcus looked around the greenhouse, this secret sanctuary Sarah had shared with him. He thought about all she'd done for him, not just in giving him a job, but in giving him back his dignity, his sense of worth. "I believe in you," he said softly. "And if you think I can do this, I'm willing to try." Sarah's smile was radiant. "Good, because I need my Chief of Maintenance Operations at tomorrow's meeting. Think you can handle that?" For the first time since reading those budget reports, Marcus felt truly confident. "Yes, I believe I can." Alice, who had been watching their interaction with keen interest, cleared her throat. "Well, my work here is done. I'll leave you two to discuss the renovation plans." As she slipped out of the greenhouse, Marcus and Sarah found themselves alone among the flowers and herbs, the setting sun painting everything in shades of gold and rose. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "Not just for the job or the promotion, but for seeing me when no one else would." Sarah moved closer, her hand coming to rest lightly on his arm. "Thank you for showing me that sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards." They stood there in the warm greenhouse as the sun set over Boston, both aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. But for now, they simply enjoyed the peaceful moment, surrounded by the legacy of Robert's love for gardens and the promise of new beginnings. The shareholders' meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. in the hotel's grand ballroom. Marcus arrived early, wearing a new suit that Sarah had insisted on having tailored for him. The transformation from his first day at the hotel was complete, at least on the outside. Inside, his stomach churned with anxiety. The ballroom was already filling with shareholders, board members, and hotel executives. Marcus recognized Richard Campbell, the silver-haired board member who'd opposed his presence, huddled with a group of similarly dressed men. Their whispered conversations stopped abruptly when they noticed him. Sarah arrived precisely at 9, looking formidable in a burgundy power suit that spoke of both authority and elegance. Alice sat in the back of the room, giving Marcus an encouraging thumbs up when he glanced her way. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, her voice clear and confident. "Thank you for attending this emergency shareholders meeting. I understand there have been concerns about some of my recent management decisions. Today, I intend to address those concerns directly." She gestured for Marcus to join her at the podium. As he walked forward, he could feel the weight of every stare, hear the murmurs of disapproval from certain corners of the room. 3 months ago, Sarah continued, I made a decision that many of you questioned. I hired Marcus Thompson based on what some would call an emotional response to a dramatic event. Today, I'm going to show you why that decision was not just morally right, but financially sound. For the next hour, Sarah and Marcus presented their findings. They showed detailed analyses of maintenance costs, guest satisfaction scores, and employee retention rates. Marcus explained his plans for modernizing the hotel's systems while preserving its historic character, demonstrating both his technical expertise and his understanding of the hotel's unique position in the market. As you can see, Sarah concluded, Mr. Thompson's contribution to this hotel has been invaluable, which is why I'm proposing his promotion to Chief of Maintenance Operations, with full voting rights on the operational committee. Richard Campbell stood up immediately. This is preposterous. The man was homeless 3 months ago. How can we trust him with such responsibility? What's to stop him from returning to his previous condition? The room fell silent. Marcus felt his face grow hot, but before he could respond, an unexpected voice spoke up from the back of the room. Excuse me, Alice said, standing. I'd like to say something. Sarah looked surprised, but nodded. Alice walked to the front of the room, her journalism training evident in her confident stride. 3 years ago, my father died because no one stopped to help him. Everyone was too busy, too afraid, or too indifferent. But Mr. Thompson, Marcus, he didn't hesitate to risk his life to save my mother. Not because she was Sarah Wellington, owner of this hotel, but because she was a human being in danger. She turned to face the room directly. You're all worried about trust. He's proven his trustworthiness every day since he started working here. But more than that, he's proven something my father always said. Character isn't about where you come from or what you own. It's about what you do when no one's watching, and how you treat people who can't do anything for you. The room was absolutely silent. Even Richard Campbell seemed taken aback by the passionate defense from Robert Wellington's daughter. If anyone in this room deserves our trust, Alice continued, it's the man who had nothing but still gave everything to save a stranger. The fact that he's also highly qualified and has improved this hotel's operations is just proof that sometimes doing the right thing is also the smart thing. Sarah was beaming with pride at her daughter. Marcus felt a lump in his throat, touched by Alice's words and her courage in speaking up. Richard Campbell, however, wasn't finished. This is all very moving, he said sarcastically, but there's another matter we need to discuss. Several board members have expressed concern about the inappropriate relationship developing between Ms. Wellington and Mr. Thompson. Murmurs filled the room. Sarah's face flushed, but she held her ground. My personal life is not up for discussion at this meeting, Richard. It is when it affects the hotel's reputation, Richard countered. We've all heard about your private dinners, your public outings together. What would Robert think about you carrying on with a former vagrant? The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked at Sarah, saw the pain and anger in her eyes, and made a decision. He stepped forward to the microphone, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Mr. Campbell, you keep asking what Robert would think. Well, from everything I've learned about him, I think he'd be proud. Proud of his wife for running this hotel with both intelligence and compassion. Proud of his daughter for standing up for what she believes in. And yes, maybe even proud that the woman he loved had the courage to see past surface appearances and judge people by their actions rather than their circumstances. He paused, looking directly at Richard. You're right about one thing. I was homeless. I lost everything once, and it taught me that what matters isn't what you have, but who you are. Sarah Wellington gave me a chance to prove who I am, and I've done my best to deserve that chance every day since. The room was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence, thoughtful, considering. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. I care about this hotel. I care about doing my job well. And yes, I care about Sarah and Alice. If that makes me unworthy in your eyes, then maybe you need to examine your own values. Because from where I stand, compassion and competence aren't mutually exclusive. Sarah stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Marcus. "I'm calling for a vote," she announced, "on both the promotion and the proposed maintenance modernization plan. As majority shareholder, my vote carries significant weight, but I want this to be a clear decision. All those in favor?" Hands began to rise. Slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. Alice counted quickly and grinned. "That's a majority, Mom. Motion carries." Richard Campbell and his supporters stood up abruptly, gathering their papers. "This isn't over, Sarah," he warned as he headed for the door. "The board won't forget this." "No," Sarah agreed, watching him leave. "I don't suppose they will, but sometimes you have to stand your ground, even if it means making enemies." As the room cleared out, Alice hugged them both. "That was amazing. Did you see their faces when I started talking about Dad?" "You were wonderful, sweetheart," Sarah said, her eyes shining with pride. "Your father would have been so proud." Marcus started to step away, giving them their moment, but Sarah caught his hand. "Where do you think you're going, Chief of Maintenance Operations? We have work to do." The way she held his hand, warm and sure, told him that they had more than just work ahead of them. They had a future to build, together. The weeks following the shareholders' meeting brought significant changes to the Hotel Wellington. Marcus threw himself into his new role, implementing the modernization plans with careful attention to both efficiency and the hotel's historic character. His office, a modest but well-appointed room near the maintenance department, quickly filled with blueprints and project plans. Summer arrived in Boston, bringing with it humid days and warm nights. The hotel's air conditioning systems were working overtime, and Marcus spent long hours ensuring everything ran smoothly. But he didn't mind the work. Every successful repair, every completed project felt like another step toward proving himself worthy of the trust placed in him. One evening in late June, Marcus was reviewing the day's maintenance reports when there was a knock at his office door. It was Gerald, the doorman who had once watched him so suspiciously. "Mr. Thompson," Gerald said, looking uncomfortable. "There's someone here to see you. Says he knows you from before." Marcus followed Gerald to the lobby, where a familiar figure stood awkwardly near the entrance. It was Tom, one of the men he'd known from his days on the street. Tom looked thin and weathered, just as Marcus had once been. "Marcus," Tom said hesitantly, "I almost didn't believe it when they said you were working here. You look different." "Tom," Marcus greeted him warmly, "what brings you here? Word on the street is you're doing well, that you're helping run this place now." Tom shifted from foot to foot. "I was wondering, well, they're tearing down the shelter on 4th Street. A lot of us don't know where to go." Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest. He knew too well the fear and uncertainty Tom was facing. "Come to my office, let's talk." Later that evening, Marcus knocked on Sarah's office door, finding her at her desk reviewing financial reports. "Sarah, I need to discuss something with you." She looked up, smiling at his serious expression. "That sounds ominous. What's on your mind?" Marcus explained about Tom's visit and the closing shelter. "I've been thinking about the service entrance building, the one we're planning to renovate. What if instead of storage space, we converted part of it into temporary housing, a place where people could stay while they get back on their feet, learn job skills?" Sarah set down her pen, considering. "The board won't like it, I know, but we could run it as a separate foundation. Use some of the money we're saving on maintenance costs. I could train them in basic repairs, help them find work in other hotels." His voice grew passionate as he outlined his vision. "Someone gave me a second chance. Maybe it's time to pass that on?" Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "Robert always said a business should do more than make money. It should make a difference." She turned back to Marcus, her eyes bright. "Write up a proposal. Make it detailed, professional. We'll present it at the next board meeting." "Really?" Marcus hadn't expected her to agree so quickly. "Really?" She moved closer to him. "You know, watching you these past months, seeing how hard you've worked, how you've never forgotten where you came from, it's been inspiring. You've changed this hotel for the better, Marcus, not just through your work, but through your example." The space between them seemed to crackle with unspoken feelings. They'd been dancing around their growing connection for months, both aware of the complications, the potential gossip, the professional implications. "Sarah," Marcus began, but she held up a hand. "Wait, before you say anything else, I need to show you something." She led him up to the rooftop greenhouse. The space had become their sanctuary over the past months, a place where they could be themselves away from the pressures and politics of the hotel. The greenhouse looked different tonight. Small lanterns had been strung up among the plants, casting a warm glow over the flowers. The old radio was playing softly. Billie Holiday's "The Very Thought of You." "Alice helped me set this up," Sarah admitted. "She said we were both being ridiculous, trying to pretend there wasn't something between us." "She's a smart girl," Marcus said softly. "She is." Sarah turned to face him. "Marcus, when Robert died, I thought that was it for me. I focused on work, on being strong for Alice. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again." She took a deep breath. "But then you came along, not just saving my life now, but showing me how to live it again." Marcus felt his heart pounding. "Sarah, I'm still not sure I deserve—" "Stop." She stepped closer. "You deserve everything good in this world. You're the most genuine, hard-working, compassionate person I know, and I'm tired of pretending I'm not falling in love with you." The words hung in the warm summer air between them. Marcus looked at her, this remarkable woman who had changed his life in so many ways. He thought about all the moments that had led them here, the accident, the second chance, the quiet dinners, the shared struggles and victories. "I love you too," he said simply. "I think I have since that first dinner in your office, when you really listened to me, not as a charity case or an employee, but as a person." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with happy tears. "Well then, Mr. Thompson, would you like to dance?" As they swayed to Billie Holiday's velvet voice, surrounded by Robert's beloved plants and the twinkling lanterns, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. This wasn't just a second chance at life, it was a second chance at love, at happiness, at everything he'd thought was forever lost to him. The next morning, Marcus started early on his proposal for the housing program. He worked at his desk, the morning sun streaming through his office window, when Alice appeared in his doorway. "So," she said, grinning, "I take it the greenhouse setup worked." Marcus felt his face flush, but he couldn't hide his smile. "Your mother told you about her plans?" "Please," Alice rolled her eyes. "It was my idea. You two needed a push. And besides," her expression grew more serious, "Dad would have liked you, you know. He always said actions speak louder than words. And your actions, they speak volumes." Before Marcus could respond, Sarah appeared behind her daughter. "Are you embarrassing my chief of maintenance operations, young lady?" "Just offering my approval," Alice said cheerfully. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have freshman orientation to prepare for." As Alice left, Sarah crossed to Marcus's desk, looking at the proposal he was writing. "The housing program?" "Yes, I want to have it ready for next week's board meeting." He hesitated, then added, "I know it won't be easy. The board, Richard Campbell, they'll fight it." Sarah smiled, placing her hand over his. "Then we'll fight back. Together." Marcus covered her hand with his other one, marveling at how natural it felt. Outside his window, he could see the Boston streets where he'd once wandered homeless. Now those same streets led home, to the hotel, to Sarah and Alice, to a future he never could have imagined. Together, he agreed, and in that word was a promise, a commitment, and a love story that had begun with an act of courage on an icy winter morning. In the months and years that followed, the Hotel Wellington's housing program would help dozens of people find their way back to stability and dignity. Richard Campbell and his supporters eventually left the board, unable to fight against the program's successful results and positive press, and in the rooftop greenhouse, where Robert's love of gardens lived on, Marcus and Sarah's love continued to grow, nurtured by shared values, mutual respect, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones that give others a chance to live their best lives. Alice went on to graduate with honors from Boston University's journalism program, writing stories about second chances and the power of seeing beyond surface appearances. And on winter mornings, when the streets were icy, Marcus would sometimes stand at his office window, remembering the day he'd rushed to help a stranger in need. He'd learned that life's most precious gifts often come disguised as challenges, and that love, real, enduring love, sees past appearances to the heart of who we truly are. The Hotel Wellington stood proud against the Boston skyline, its historic facade unchanged, but its heart transformed by a simple truth, that sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't the ones we possess, but the chances we take and the love we share along the way. Thank you for watching today's story. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to relive the magic of the 80s every day with our heartfelt stories. May God bless you and your family. And don't forget to click on the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another totally rad story you won't want to miss. See you in the next video, and stay awesome.